I have several flashbacks involving my years with Ebb Glockner. We used to travel together on business. Ebb was the driver. The day would start around 5:30 a.m. in the dark. I recall Ebb driving old Route 52 in the early morning light, about 75 miles an hour, while reading to me out loud so I'd be sure to understand our mission, and holding the steering wheel with his free hand. As a telephone conversationalist, Ebb never identified himself, never said hello or goodbye. Reflecting back on my many years of telephoning with Ebb, I've concluded that Ebb already knew who was calling and was absolutely sure who he was, so why waste time announcing himself? As to skipping the small talk, I've concluded it's either A, Ebb wanted to let you know this call is all business and he's got no time to waste. B, this was a manifestation of the absolute intensity of Ebb's focus on the topic at hand. C, I'm paying you by the hour, so let's get on with it. Or D, all of the above.
Yeah, his middle name was No Fear.
Yeah.
He'd always run and give you a big hug. He'd start singing, Chrissy is a friend of mine. Yeah, he will do it anytime for a nickel or a dime. Chrissy is a friend of mine. And then he'd go into ta-ra-ra boom die, ta-ra-ra boom die.
I mean, he was a throwback.
You never needed to wonder where you stood with Ebb Glockner. He would tell you exactly where you stood.
He was so excited to see you every time. He just made you feel so important. He always embraced you with a huge hug and kissed you on the cheek and bearded you.
Over the years, Ebb looked for colleagues who would try to run as fast as he was running. Most of us couldn't. But by trying to run with Ebb, we ended up going faster and further than we thought we could. Almost pulled along in his draft, which is probably all Ebb wanted.
What were your earliest memories of the business?
Well, I think high stress. I mean, we were definitely cash poor. Everything he had, he put back into the businesses. And so, I can remember waking up at night and a light would be on in the hall, and I would get up and look through the crack in the door, and he would be sitting in the living room reading the Bible, which means he couldn't sleep. I would say, high stress, and I loved listening to those stories. So when he came home from JC's or, whatever meeting he had that night, I would get up and sit in the hallway and listen to him tell. But, Mom didn't have a car. No, and I'd get so embarrassed because on Fridays she would, couldn't eat meat on Fridays, so she'd get us all dressed up and we'd go down to 2nd Street to the dealership and everybody would say how cute we looked and everything. But we took a cab and I was like, I just remembered, I was like, no, we have these cars and we don't have a car at home. But, I remember, Mom took a nap. When we did, finally, she did have a car. The odometers, nothing was ever hooked up. Even when we were 16 and had to take our driver test, I was scared to death I was going to get caught. I didn't know how fast I was going. You never knew how fast I was going. And then the stories, Dad told about, the building on 2nd Street, gosh, it was old. So during the 37 flood, because they lived down in that part of town, they moved the furniture up to the upper floors of that building, right?
Yes.
And I said, Dad, after the flood, they then moved to the top of Waller Hill in with an aunt until the water went down. And I said, Dad, when you moved back home, did you have to like scrub all that mud off? He goes, well, we were so far behind on our rent that we never moved back there, which told you they didn't even own their home. We moved to another house. But, cash was definitely
Tight.
Yeah,
Didn't have
tight.
any cash. Yeah.
No.
Mainly, there's just not very many people like Ebb that were like thinking ahead and trying to continue their legacy after they were gone, right? Some people can't like plan for the next day,
Well, that's what you would call a big personality, right?
Definitely.
And I tell you, Connor, I mean, we sit and laugh and watch really how sometimes I say mismatched my mom and dad were, because they were so different. My dad, was this big personality, and if you read his obituary, did you read his obituary?
I did.
He wrote that himself. So that would be my dad in accolades to himself. And then on the other side, my mom, when my mom had been diagnosed with cancer, and she really had limited time, and I was back in Portsmouth for visiting for Thanksgiving, and my sister pulled me aside. She said, now, Mom is going to pull you aside and delay the two of you coming over to Andy and Barbara's for Thanksgiving because she wants you to help her write her obituary. And I'm going, okay. I mean, we're on board here. She knew she had, limited time. And so we sit down to write her obituary. Connor, it's 2 paragraphs. It is the extreme opposite. My mom was so humble. My mom did not want any attention. And it was just incredibly obvious, the difference in their person. And it's probably why they did compliment each other, because they definitely weren't competing. Faith, absolutely high on his priority list. I can remember laying in bed at night and Dad coming around with his bottle of holy water, and I don't know if you're Catholic or not, but the holy water, and he would from the door sprinkle over to my bed, over to my sister's bed, and you'd feel the splash on your face. And my mom would cringe because he's leaving watermarks on the headboard, But that was part of my dad's ritual, was blessing us with this holy water every night. Then he would stand in the doorway, and as the years went on, he would stand longer and longer. Dad, why are you standing there longer? He goes, well, my list of people I'm praying for who have died and gone before us just keeps getting longer and longer. So, just a testimony to his faith. And I look at the faith that my mom and dad passed on to us as the biggest gift they've given us. Not a monetary gift, slide that way. The gift of faith and the importance of God in our lives, and the importance of our responsibility to serve God by serving others. And you hear that in my brother as well. And that is truly an example that was lived, therefore we could follow. He didn't just talk the talk. He lived it. He really did. And my mom did too. My mom served people in a quiet way. So many ways she served people nobody will ever know about. My dad was more visible in his service to others. Yeah, I mean, my dad, I watched my dad grow the business from a car dealership to multiple entities within the organization. And that did consume a lot of his time, which my mom was resentful of. But that I also look back and watch the challenge. And Connor, it wasn't about accruing wealth. It was never, you never heard it that I'm doing this so I can have more money, ever. I think he loved the challenge. I think in growing the business, he was creating more jobs. I think he was contributing to the community. Portsmouth, being economically depressed as it was, needed any type of growth and opportunity. And so all of these businesses that he added to the core Chevrolet dealership were, I think, ways to enhance the community. So, and if you heard it once, you heard it ever. If you have a business in the community, you're dependent on the community for your business to thrive. You reciprocally have a responsibility to give back to the community. So you always heard that. And I don't know, so it was a reciprocation of duty. And again, through the years, as my dad, I was probably in 6th or 7th grade, and I think one of his business ventures did well. It's like, we never upgraded our house, Connor. We continued to live on Willow Way in a 3-bedroom ranch house. And that was the humility of my mother. It wasn't about needing more. It wasn't about materialism. And that has stayed with me too. It's not about what you have. It's about who you have in your life. And again, God and family. Absolutely. And and my mom kind of reined him in too, because I think there was one time he wanted to, we never owned a car. We always only drove demos, right? Yeah, here was a car dealer. You never owned your car. And he wanted his demo to be this yellow Camaro, and my mom shut him down on that one. Like, that was too flashy. That was too flashy. Yeah, too flashy. You're not doing that.
They built this new building, here in 1968, and we actually moved in 69.
Yeah. So I was a freshman in college, and I came home for the opening.
Yeah, I was a junior in high school.
But do you remember Dad and Grandpa screaming at each other on Sunday dinners? And Grandpa kept saying, nobody. Everything was downtown. You shopped for your clothes. You got your car fixed. You'd go up and get lunch, go back and pick your car. It was all right there. And Grandpa was like, "You're going to go." Oh my gosh, I was scared to death. So I was like junior or senior when he was looking at this Byerly property. And I remember going into Father Grimes and saying, my dad does not know what he's doing.
Yeah, they didn't think that, Grandpa didn't think that people would drive 3 miles out here to look at a car.
Hey, Biff, where's Miles Around?
Where's what?
Miles Around. It's where everybody says people come from to buy a car here.
Oh, Miles Around. Well, people come from miles around to buy their new Chevrolets or International trucks from your Uncle Ebb Glockner because they know he's a good old boy and he'll treat them right.
You mean he sells cars for less than anybody in Miles Around?
Yeah, and less than other dealers right here in Portsmouth, too. Everybody knows Ebb Glockner can save them more money on new Chevrolet cars, trucks, or four-wheel drive vehicles than anybody in or out of town.
Where's that?
Where's what?
You just said something about around the town. Where's that?
Around the town? It's just a little this side of Miles Around.
Oh, you're funny, Bill.
Thank you very much.
Your best buys are made at Glockner Chevrolet.
You don't lie about Uncle Ebb.
Because Uncle Ebb is a good old boy.
Glockner Chevrolet and International Harvester. Everything in cars and trucks. Portsmouth.
You've never been told off till you've been told off by Ebb Glockner. When I was a young lawyer working for Glockner's in the 1970s, I once entered into a compromise settlement of a disputed claim. Thinking the deal made economic sense, which in fact it did, I had returned to my office on the second floor of Security Central Plaza and was seated at my desk when I looked up and find the doorway filled with Ebb Glockner. He did not identify himself or say hello. Instead, his greeting both called into question my parentage and made a certain odious comparison involving my mother. Then things got nasty. My settlement hadn't followed Ebb's model. It wasn't my A effort. Ebb wasn't interested in tying one for the Gipper. Later that night, I'd gone to my home and was watching my two young children play games on the carpet, knowing that my career was probably over and wondering how to tell the kids they shouldn't plan on going to college. The phone rang. You guessed it, no greeting, no hello or goodbye. Instead, Ebb's voice said, "Clay, I'm glad I know you." Then the line went dead. I think I know how the ancient gladiator must have felt after being beaten in the Colosseum. The opponent has his foot on your neck and his sword at your throat. You strain to see the box seats, and Caesar turns his thumb up. You can live to fight another day, this time to excel, and not to be so fast to compromise. Obviously, I never forgot Ebb's lessons. I realize now that those events were traumatic, not so much because I thought I'd blown my career, but more because I had disappointed Ebb by not functioning at the level of excellence he both defined and demanded. Over the years, Ebb looked for colleagues who would try to run as fast as he was running. Most of us couldn't. But by trying to run with Ebb, we ended up going faster and further than we thought we could. Almost pulled along in his draft, which is probably all Ebb wanted.
I came on board in 1975 with the Ohio Auto Dealers Association, and I met Ebby at that time. He was involved, actually, he was on the Motor Vehicle Dealers Board, and involved in the industry and the dealer members. So everybody talked about, well, you got to meet Ebb Glockner. You got to meet Ebb Glockner. So I set out to try to do that.
Well, what was your first impression of him?
You never needed to wonder where you stood with Ebb Glockner. He would tell you exactly where you stood. Good, bad, or indifferent.
I like that.
You know, Ebby was a terrible golfer, but he played in the golf league every week down in Portsmouth because it gave him a chance to talk. And if you had ears, Ebby would fill them with words. He loved to talk, and he shared a lot of wisdom with a lot of people. Kind of homespun wisdom, you know. At times you had to wonder where he was coming from with it, but he was, you know, he never met a stranger. He just loved to interact with people. And
well, kids, your Uncle Ebb just keeps cutting his prices down at Glockner Chevrolet.
Cutting prices?
Well, of course he's cutting his prices.
What for, Biff?
Just to sell more and more new Chevy cars and trucks. You see, your Uncle Ebb cuts the prices the factory puts on the cars every time he has a sale. Then, likely as not, he'll cut them down even smaller when folks come in to trade.
What's he cut them with, scissors?
No, just a pencil.
That's silly. You can't cut things with a pencil.
Well, your Uncle Ebb can. He's the champion price cutter in the Ohio Valley.
Wow, really?
He sure is. And I'm not going to say he goes a little overboard with it, but I was out playing golf with your Uncle Ebb yesterday, and when I yelled 4 4.
Yeah?
Uncle Ebb yelled, 3.5.
Your best buys are made at Glockner Chevrolet.
You'll love our Uncle Ebb.
Cause Uncle Ebb is a good old boy.
Glockner Chevrolet, an international harvester. Everything in cars and trucks in Portsmouth.
Give me a few tests.
Yeah, test 1, 2, 3. Ebb Glockner was a friend of mine. He could do it anytime.
That's a good one right there.
My first encounter with Ebb Glockner, Mr. Glockner at the time, I was 17 years old, and senior year in high school, and I wanted a new car. My dad went with me down to Glockner's on the corner of 2nd and Chillicothe Street at the foot of the U.S. Grant Bridge. And I'd already been in there and looked around, and then they had this beautiful red Camaro. You know, the new pony cars just came out that end of September, and I was one of the first ones in there, I'm sure. And I had saved some money, and Dad was going to take care of buying it, and then put his little book together with interest on it and charge me, the monthly payments while I worked at the store. He had a lock on me from then, you know. But I remember when we were finishing up the deal, or in the midst of the deal with the salesman, Abby came out from the back office, you know, all dressed up, nice suit and big smiling face, but still a serious side to him, you know, in the midst of this business transaction that's going on. And he made his first impression. I mean, I'm thinking, man, this is the guy I've seen on the billboard, or heard about this guy on the radio ads. And here he is, you know, I'm getting to meet Ebb Glockner and Uncle Ebb. So that was my first encounter with, and my first impressions were just, you know, very, very good. Anytime I showed up at the Elks, or almost anywhere, it didn't matter. It probably embarrassed me at first, but after a while, you just get used to it. He'd always run and give you a big hug if he knew you and you were a friend. And he would, even before you got to you to hug you, he would start singing, you know, Chrissy is a friend of mine. Yeah, he will do it anytime for a nickel or a dime. Chrissy is a friend of mine. And then he'd go into ta-ra-ra boom die, ta-ra-ra boom die. You know the rest of the song. But that was his standard shtick when he would greet me. Those were good times where I learned a lot, you know, from him. And he would share stories about some of his businesses that he started, you know, the cable business. And so before I even started reading some of this stuff that you've preserved and documented for the Glockner family and some of the videos that he did, and, you know, I knew some of those things, and I was always impressed by what all he was able to accomplish in his lifetime. I mean, it's amazing.
What do you think made him so prolific, like in life and business?
He never met a stranger, and it didn't matter where they were at and what work, their job, what have you, what religion, you name it. You know, he was, you know, had an open mind, open heart to talk to anybody, and whether it was pleasure or business. But I mean, he's a relationship builder. I mean, that's how you do business. Mentoring, as I call it, you know, continued all through. Anytime, you know, we got together. Of course, you know, he was, he'd have his gin and tonic, which he called the Ricky Ticky. And, you know, so many people know that because he'd always order from the bar from 20 feet away. You know, whoever it was at the bar, you know, I'll have a Ricky Ticky, you know, make it a double or whatever. And he always, you know, he's a man that just he loved life, and he loved his wife. Some of the conversations we'd sit and we made drinking and at the bar at the Elks after the match was over, or you know, some business meeting. And he'd look me right in the eye and he'd say, you know, Chris, we're two of the luckiest guys in the world. And I would, you know, at first I would pause like, okay, yeah, I think we are. But he'd say, we're very fortunate to have Marilyn and Joanne. Marilyn's my wife. He said, you know, they put up with us because I think he kind of learned my business style. And, you know, party a little bit, you know, work hard, party hard. And so we had that kind of connection, I guess, and we kind of saw that in each other. But he would always remind me how lucky we were to have our wives. and that they both to put up with us was what he was saying. And so, I never forgot that. That made an impression on me. I thought, Ebbie's right. He's older than me. He sees things I don't see, and it had an impact on me.
And Ebb Glockner was extremely close to Vern Rife. He would tell Vern just like it was and just like it is. When he's committed to something, it's not being committed to something just because it personally benefits him, but committed to make the industry better.
And how do you think those relationships that he had impacted the industry? Can you be specific?
Well, I would say that Ebby was one of the reasons that we are able to have the strongest, or one of the strongest franchise laws in the country. Because he went to Vern Rife and he said, we need this franchise law passed. We need the support of a franchise law to protect us in our relationship with the manufacturers. And Vern made a commitment to Ebby that he would support it. Manufacturers had 50 of the 52 cards, and the dealers had a couple of deuces. We changed the law so dealers had the right to buy more than one store, so the dealers didn't have to be beholden to the manufacturers constantly for inventory, so that the manufacturers couldn't force dealers to buy 10 times as many spark plugs as they needed because the manufacturers had made too many. So he's kind of one of the guys that was the pioneer clearing the way. He liked people. He communicated well with people. He worked really hard. But Ebb was a likable guy. As tough as he was a very likable guy. I mean, if you didn't like Ebb Glockner, you didn't like living.
How do you think he kind of towed that line of just really tough, hard-nosed businessman, and just ended up being so likable at the end of the day?
By being honest with and being straightforward with people. You knew what you knew. I mean, if you messed up, Ebb would tell you messed up. But if Ebb was your friend and Ebb was your partner in working on something, you knew he had your back every step of the way. I mean, he was a throwback. Now you get all this political correctness and you get all this sugar coating and everything. You never got any of that with Ebb.
Well, I think that's a good way to explain it, Tim.
I mean, the guys like Andy that worked with him closely, you got to give a lot of credit to, because, Ebb, at times, he was a load to handle. His enthusiasm get right out there. And sometimes it's like kind of, trying to rein in a wild horse, but he was always, if he was your partner, if he was on your team, you knew he had your back.
What, Tim, just as a closing thought, 41 years with OADA, and you've seen just dealers over Ohio, and of course the Glockner family kind of perpetuate Ebb's legacy. Do you have any closing thoughts on how Ebb's legacy continues to live on in his successors, like Andy and Tim and the boys?
They all share a lot of the same traits. They're direct communicators, maybe a little bit more sophisticated at times, but direct communicators, and they're all honest and straightforward with you. You know where you stand with them. Or if Ebb said, yeah, that works for me, you knew you had a deal. You didn't have to have anything else inked. You knew you had a deal. His word was his bond.
Hey kids, what's so special about your Uncle Ebb Glockner that folks drive from all over southern Ohio and eastern Kentucky to buy cars and trucks from him?
Well, it's a lot of little things.
Yeah?
Yeah, like little prices.
Right. And how about a little better service in his award-winning service department? They're open early every morning, and Uncle Ebb makes sure every little thing is done right.
But I know something big he has.
What's that, Tracy?
A big selection.
Right you are. Uncle Ebb has the biggest selection in the area. And he's the area truck headquarters, too. He's got every kind of truck made by Chevy and International Harvester.
Yeah, and I know one more little thing that makes him special.
Really? What's that?
Just because he's a good old boy.
Your best buys are made at Glockner Chevrolet.
You don't lie about Uncle Ebb.
Cause Uncle Ebb is a good old boy.
Glockner Chevrolet and International Harvester. Everything in cars and trucks. Portsmouth.
I'm Tim Glockner. I'm the number one grandchild of 10. So most of our childhood memories were made right here at Dam 31. This is where we got to know Nan and Papa really well. And of course, Joe and I were number one and number two. And when he would refer to us, he called us by our number, right? And he would say, Timmy, my number one grandson. I took that for years as like I was the favorite, but it was just I was the first.
Yeah.
He just adored all of us, and it was obvious that he loved being a grandfather. And that was the thing I think that was so impactful for me growing up is he took his role as son and uncle and big brother. He was the oldest of his generation, and then father and grandfather. So seriously,
that's kind of what made him tick.
That's who he was first. I mean, lots of people in the community saw him as a business leader, a community leader, and he was that too, but he was family first.
So
I lived for his approval. It was like the only thing that mattered to me was like, I think all of us probably felt the same way. And Nan the same, but for the boys, probably we just wanted Papa to be proud of us, and we did whatever he could to impress him and gain his approval. We became buddies later on. I mean, I think I was probably 13 or something like that, 12, 13, 14, somewhere in there. It was teenage years, but before I was driving, he'd pick me up on a Saturday. And I can't remember if he'd picked up Joe or Greg. He probably did on occasion too, but he would pick me up, take me out to his office, which was in the old Quality Leasing building. Go over basic accounting principles, business principles, and just what a revenue dollar was and an expense dollar and gross margins and that kind of stuff. And
how old
he
were you
would,
at the time?
I'm going to say 12 or 13, and I would just nod like, yeah, I didn't know anything he was talking about. I had no idea, but I just was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to fake it and like figure it out later. And I would hear him brag to other people, yeah, Timmy, he's got it. He's a numbers guy. And I had no idea what he was talking about. He did. And Dad and Sue may have told you the same thing. He would come home and relive his day and talk about business at the dinner table. Did they mention anything about that? He didn't do that to us when we were kids, but like when I became a teenager and I had expressed interest in the family business because I knew that was important to him. You know what I mean? And from an early age, my dad would tell us, don't feel obligated. I felt obligated. Do whatever makes you happy. But he would kind of come behind my dad and say, don't let me down. You know? And so I knew that that was important to him, and family was important, carry on the family name and the legacy, and his heritage was so important to him. And I thought, I can't, if it's important to him, it's got to be important to me.
And next thing you know, this property goes up for auction. Ebb buys it, and we're immediately fixing fence, and he's putting cattle on it. He's just going to be a cattle farmer. He's going from car dealer to cattle farmer, and he was always on his tractor bush hogging, fixing something, but we were always terrified because he only ran it in the highest gear. So it was like as fast as you could do anything. That's what he did. He did everything really fast. And when we knew that he was on the tractor, of course, when he had the bush hog on, you could literally hear him from anywhere on the property because he would run over anything in his way. And you could just hear that thrashing from the bush hog. And but you would hear it stop, and everybody would kind of look at each other like, who's going to go get him? You know, he's stuck. Like, if he's not moving, he's stuck somewhere, and you just never knew where he was going to be. So
he's not just resting.
He's not resting. Like, he's not taking a break. But I remember there was a day that he was cutting a portion of the farm that was, I think that Steve and Dad had tried to tell him that he didn't need to bush hog this portion. It was kind of on like a grade, so it was I don't know how steep of it was, too steep really to take a tractor, but we had pulled him out from being stuck twice, and then we heard the mower quit again, and Dad just looked at me and it's like, you're gonna have to go get him this time. So at the time I had a Jeep, so I had something 4-wheel drive to go pull him out, but he had like kind of gone over a hill a little bit trying to mow on an extreme angle, and the tractor literally like tipped into a tree to save him from going over, and he didn't think there was anything wrong with it. He just wanted me to pull him out as fast as I could so that he could get back to mowing. But the
number 5 house was a summer retreat for the Catholic nuns, and he kept 2 kegs of beer on tap for the nuns. That's a true story. And then one summer we wanted to, I don't remember if we asked or if he just wanted to show us how to navigate the river, but his dad spent some time over here at the dam, and he was good with his hands, and they had this blacksmith shop, and he did a lot of work. He had an old 13-foot John boat and a 15-horsepower Johnson that had to be from the 40s or 50s. I mean, it was vintage. And he got it running and showed us how to launch it behind the wall. And me and Joe and Greg would take that out one summer until he finally bought us a 15-horsepower Honda motor, right?
Yeah.
Down in Vanceburg. That was the first time I drove, actually. Is that right?
Was that?
That's where we were going.
So
I was 14. He wanted to buy us a new Honda outboard motor, and he bought it from the Honda store down in Flemingsburg. And he had a yellow Caprice Classic, and he put me up front, and he was in the passenger seat, and Joe and Greg were white-knuckled in the back, probably scared to death.
The only time I ever remember wearing a seatbelt in my car.
And I followed a dump truck all the way down the AA, turned left, went to Flemingsburg. We threw the outboard motor in the back, and then I drove back. And when we pulled in the dam right here, Nan comes running, and she was like, "Abby, what are you doing?" And he goes, "Well, Joanne, he can drive just as good as you." Like, burn. And he kept in touch with his Squadron 8. They had reunions at least once a year, and he did that his entire life, and that meant a whole lot to him. His country meant a lot to him, and those guys saw a lot, in action. He lost his brother in flight school, his little brother Leo, which was probably about like Joe and I. I mean, they were super close in age and loved each other, and they went off to flight school together, and Leo flew into a flock of seagulls down in, I think it was Pensacola. It was in Florida, one of the Florida bases. Took him down, and it killed him. Abby went on to fly like 60-some missions off the Bunker Hill in the Philippines. And he had a plane or two shot up really bad, enough so that they just shoved it off in the ocean and put him in another plane to complete another mission. And he made a promise to God that if he could make it home alive, that he would be a daily communicant and go to mass every day, which he did his entire life, and so do my mom and dad now. But and that was another example that he was always of service to God, to his wife, to his kids and community, and it was so apparent.
Do you think that had a big part in just his fearlessness as like an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I think. I mean, those guys lived through that war, and so many of their friends died. He probably felt like, he should have probably not lived through the war, and he definitely had no fear. He took big risks, and he had some big failures, and he won more than he lost. Obviously, he saw his dad and his Aunt Helen go through bankruptcy in 1933 and lost the hardware store, and the bank took everything, and they sold all the inventory for 10 cents on the dollar just to keep the Chevrolet franchise, and they'd lost it all several times before, so I don't think he had too much fear in that. He was more worried about keeping the family together and everyone being healthy.
Did you get much writing from Ebb over the years?
Oh yeah. And his handle of writing deteriorated through the years with his shakes. It was never done in a critical way, but it would always be, keep the good Lord in your life. He was always sending he had little sayings that he would clip and then make copies of and add them. It became his letterhead. And here's one of his letters. No. Okay, so here's some of the inserts. My husband is a real character. So here's an insert for me to give to Tom. Take care. The toes that you step on today may be connected to the ass that you have to kiss tomorrow.
That's awesome.
Oh my gosh, that was just a classic for my dad to do stuff like that. Oh golly. Oh, here's one. Volunteers go to heaven. So this is one of his inserts. Many will be shocked to find that when the day of judgment nears, that there's a special place in heaven set aside for volunteers, furnished with big recliners, satin couches, and footstools, where there's no committee chairman, no group leaders or carpools, no eager team that needs a coach, no bazaar, no bake sale. There will be nothing to staple, not one thing to fold or mail. Telephone list will be outlawed, but a finger snap will bring cool drinks and gourmet dinners and treats fit for a king. And you ask, who'll serve these privileged few and work for all their worth? Why, all those who reap the benefits and not once volunteered on earth. That's a tribute to volunteers, so it tells you.
That's incredible.
Okay. I don't see a date. Okay, here's a date. This has to be from 1996. Okay. Dear Mary, Tom, and all, I'm so glad we're coming out for an overnight. Mother hates to leave her nest. So my mom, oh my gosh, Connor, my mom was such a homebody. She would never stay any place. Well, she would never stay more than 3 days. She would say, dirty socks and fish smell after 3 days. So they didn't come out to visit me very often, but okay. All is well with us. Car business has been slow. She would always say that.
It doesn't matter what was going on.
I know it's never good enough. Okay. All is well with us. Car business has been slow. GM labor problems affecting availability. The transmission of Olds, Cadillac, and this is hard to read, and 32 employees into the plaza has worked smoothly. Okay, so that's when they acquired the Olds Cadillac dealership. Okay, so the transition of the Oldsmobile Cadillac and 32 of their employees into the plaza has worked smoothly, but are going to have to add 17 more service bays. It takes many to hopefully make money. I don't know if that was it takes money to hopefully make money. Andy does a super job. He has a good business head, sensible, honest, fair, humble, and shares his appreciation for the employees and customers. He is proud of his sons. Tim is so interested and eager for knowledge of the business, as is Joe and Greg. Greg would be my sister's son, Greg Fitzer, who passed away. I write and send them tidbits about business attitudes, etc. Love you all, and especially my Mary Ann, Papa Ebb.
But I do remember I was a sophomore in college. Tim would come home on the weekends. Number one, he would always like to spend time with family, but also his girlfriend was back here still. So he would come home on weekends in college. When I went to school, I didn't come home near as often, which I just didn't. And Pop would write me letters, but I remember one that he wrote me, and he was tearing my ass about something. I think he was just his point was to not waste my time at college, to get the most out of it, but don't screw it up either. And so it's a 2 full-page letter, handwritten in the most illegible hand cursive that's ever been. It was like everything looked like an L. Like there were so many L's. But if
fast, right?
Yeah, but if you could, it was almost, you almost needed a decoder if you never witnessed his handwriting, like you'd say, what is this? But you could like speed read it. So I get to the back page, and then, so he goes from, giving you some constructive criticism to reminding you to keep your faith, to he just reminded you your core values. And then, of course, he always told you he loved you, and he was proud of you, regardless that he could, if you were in person, if he was writing you a letter on the phone, didn't matter. Like he would, if he would criticize you, he would bring you back up too. He would never just like leave you. He would never hang up or leave the conversation in any negative manner. It was always, he always finished it with something positive. But I just remember this one. I get to the second page, I flip it over, and there's $2 paperclip to the page. I just flipped it over, so I hadn't read the second page yet. But all I could concentrate on was like, what the heck's this $2 for? So I'm reading down through it, and he's out of the criticism part of this letter, and he's into the the good part I'm happy about, and then he tells I love you, I'm proud of you, and then he says, have a beer on me.
He was a big letter writer. Abby, he put a lot of his thoughts on paper. Dad did too, and that's where we get it. And Abby and Joanne and Papa wrote us letters all growing up, and why I kept them all, I don't know. I don't think I was that sentimental then, or thought they would be good keepsakes, but at the time I thought, I hate to throw it away, and I just threw them all in shoebox, and Monica found them a few years back and put them in chronological order, and I'm looking at those today.
We
But-
got to describe these letters to him because,
yeah.
like,
Well, he was cheap. Okay, he was the product of the Great Depression, so he would not spend $2 on stationery or a card. If someone sent him a card that he really liked, he would photocopy it and then like make his own letterhead.
yeah, but he's got his name in like a script font at the top of the PO box.
He made his own logo, the damn farm with the Black Angus cattle and quotes or things that he found over the years, or people sent him, and made his own letterhead. And then you can see his handwriting's like Dad. He was probably shaking. He had tremors, so his penmanship wasn't that great later in life. But I'll read one of these letters to you and just give you an idea. So when he wrote me during high school, there's no business advice. It was mostly to take serious my role as the big brother and the oldest grandchild, and to have a good prayer life, and to be a servant to God and community. And it's kind of, bear with me because it's kind of hard to read his handwriting a little bit, but this is from October 17th of 1996. So I would have been a sophomore in college. Thank you for your nice letter and filling us in on your personal life and sharing your concerns with Joe and Greg. You are all good young men. You have love and respect for one another. You being the oldest will have the greatest influence on all the others. Be unselfish and preach not to be envious of one another or competitive. All your openness is healthy. It makes me feel so good. I love you and I'm so proud of you. That was a typical letter from him, but he told me that a lot, that basically me being the oldest was going to set the tone for how everyone else lives. So
hey, Dave. Well, I guess, I mean, to start, so this building was built 1967 is when construction started.
Okay.
Hey, Nate. And again, the reason this building is here is the Chevy store was actually, as you come across the Grant Bridge, it was there to the right, and that's now Shawnee State University. So when my grandfather had this dream of coming out to Rosemount, everyone said, like, why would you take your business out of town? And again, it's evolved to, number one, there were, I can't remember how many dealers in Portsmouth, but I mean, there was Frank Teege and Capital Pontiac Buick, and there's countless others, but there wasn't enough room in downtown Portsmouth. And he came out here, there was land, and everyone thought he was crazy to take his business out of town, which, you know, some parts of us, we wish it was still downtown. But this property that we're on right now, I don't know how many acres, but I'm going to guess 25 to 35, 40 acres that we stand on. There's nowhere in Portsmouth that we could have put this type of, you know, footprint in. And I think that's where I get it. People will, like, as we're walking by and somebody says, hey, Mike, whatever, I walk so fast. And it's like my grandfather used to do the same thing. He was like, had this larger than life personality and presence that he would literally walk through the shops just to make sure people were working. When Pop was like around, like people were like standing at attention, because he was like, if you weren't working, he'd tear your ass and let you know. The funnest things that I do in getting to know our people is like going and, hey, you know, I talk to James. James and I share a lot of qualities. He's one of our techs in lower service. He's a runner. He loves to work out. So we'll talk about, you know, hey, I ran this morning and I ran this many miles and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, you're just developing that bond with your people. Hey, Kevin, how'd your son do in his football game this last weekend? And again, we love knowing each one of our employees on a personal level, because that's what means so much to us. We like to say, you know, your family when you're here. We like to, you know, treat you like family and pay you like an owner, because we want people to take ownership of everything that they do, whether they're a technician, whether they're a service advisor, whether they're a call center representative, they sell cars, or they're the receptionist. We want them, you know, they're all family. So, but yeah, Sauce. So Andy Saltzman just walked by. His dad was our fixed operations director and worked for my grandfather, then my dad, and ended his career working for Tim and Joe and I. Gus actually worked for our company for 47 years.
Right.
And it's funny because he used to always say, I used to change your diapers, now you're my boss. So it's like, we've had so many employees that have been with us for so long, and it's
full circle kind of thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so
My name's Gus Saltzman. First name's Gus. Last name is Saltsman. I started out with Ebb Glockner. He was the, he would have been number 3 generation, I guess, or 4, I'm not real sure. And then he was really the trainer. Ebby had a reputation for being hard, but he wasn't. He was very, very easy to get along with as long as you did your job. He taught us all the business, and then when he handed it down to his son Andy, Andy let us run our thing, do our thing, and we carried on what we learned, and now we've got the younger 3 boys, and we're training them, I would guess to say, but not really. They're all very good, and they're learning as they go. But I've brought 3 of them into this world, the way I figure. I've trained them all.
My name's Rick Puckett, and I work at Glockner Oil Company. I hold the title as president, but that kind of covers everything. So we all do what needs to be done. Well, Ebb and I met back in the late 70s, and I was a buyer at a stone quarry, and he was the supplier. And our meeting didn't get off real well to start with. However, Ebb made things right, and I seen right then that, you know, he was a person of his word. So, you know, one thing led to another, and a third party asked me if I'd like to have an opportunity to join the company, which after a couple, 3 months, I did just that. But, you know, Ebb, his instructions were that we give opportunities. We present opportunities, and it's up to you to take advantage of them.
Sure.
Here's our company's assets. You can leverage them to create opportunities for not only, you know, yourself, but for your teammates, for your company, for their customers. Not one time did he ever tell me, don't lose it.
Yeah.
But, you know, treat it like your own. And, you know, what more confidence could you ever have than that? So he put the opportunities out there, nurtured, coached, taught, sometimes knock you down, turn around and pick you up and hug you and tell you he loved you, and all things were okay.
My name is Marty Glockner. I've been with Glockner Chevrolet 43 years. Started in 1974 cutting grass. Then went to college. Ebb sent me off to college for 2 years and told me not to screw it up. So I came back after 2 years and been doing parts ever since. Ebb's best attribute was he could take you in, scream at you, ream your whatever, and then at the end of the day, he built you back up and gave you a big hug, and you knew you were okay. And Ebb was fair. You got your due diligence when you did wrong, but when you did right, Ebb let you know it. He was a very fair person in that regard, and thank him for giving me a chance to prove myself, and I think I've done well for him. With him, it was honesty. You had to be honest. Everything with him was family, which was good. He treated you like family, and he wanted to treat the customers like family. And he always wanted to be fair and honest with them. He wanted to give them their money's worth or whatever. Whether it was a nickel or $1,000, he wanted to be fair. He wanted to treat the customer well.
My name is John Glockner. I do building maintenance here at the garage. I've been here for way too long, 38 years or so. Ebb was my uncle. He was known to a lot of people as Uncle Ebb. I think there was even an advertising campaign once about Uncle Ebb is a good old boy. And all my cousins and I knew him as Uncle Ebb. Ebb was the big presence here. I mean, he was the man to please, and everybody wanted to please him. Everybody that worked for him respected him, I think, and got along with him pretty well. He was quite the feller. Personally, Ebb actually gave me a house that used to sit here over in the middle of the showroom lot. And my wife and I still live in the house and raised our 3 children in it. And set us well on our way. My wife worked here too. I met her here. She actually worked for Ebb.
First, I'm Tony Christopher. I would be his great nephew. I've been here 36 years, and every time Papa Ebb come in, he would grab me, give me a big hug and a kiss on the cheek. He called me T. Well, we had a Christmas party one time, and it was actually down at the Ramada Inn. And he got up, they had a band there, and he got up and he wanted to sing a song, and they really wanted him off of the stage. Well, he kept going up. Finally, they let him sing Bow-Legged Women Drive Me Crazy or something.
I love to go swim with bow-legged women and dive between their legs.
Yes. And he stayed out too late that night, and Aunt Joanne locked him out of the house that night.
Aunt Joanne, my grandmother. God rested her soul.
Yep.
And she was a saint for putting up with my grandfather.
He come into work the next morning, and he looked like a little puppy that had got spanked with a
switch or whatever.
Oh, yeah, he wasn't in a good frame of mind the next morning.
He worked hard, but he played harder, didn't he? Ray, perfect. Perfect. We need you.
Oh, no.
We're telling Ebb Glockner stories, Ray.
I don't have any.
Ray Fannin. Ray has worked for us for how long?
27 years.
27 years. What do you remember most about Papa Ebb?
Oh, his stories. Just typical Ebby stories, war stories and everything. And back, he had already gotten out of the business, kept his office here when I came.
Right.
But, he was a colorful man, no doubt. I can tell you one Ebby story. He was up at the service department one day, and he seen me. He said, how's things going? I said, oh, pretty good. I said, but Crick. I said, it's never good enough. He said, tell me about it. I married one.
That is a classic.
Yeah.
Andy's the one that hired me and they had just bought the Toyota Honda store. We had Porsche, Audi, Volkswagen, Toyota, and Honda when I walked in the door. And I walked in as the cashier and walked in on a Saturday when I heard there was going to be an opening, and walked in on a Saturday, and Tom Lancaster, if you remember him,
Oh, yeah.
When I left Andy's office, he walked into Andy's office and said, "If you don't hire her, I quit."
Good choice. And 44 years later?
44 years later, I said I've been given so many opportunities. I did probably 5 different jobs down there. Every time that something came up that was a step up from what I was doing, I had an opportunity to move up, and then came up here in 94, and I've been here since 94 and done several jobs here as well. So I feel like I've always been given opportunities at Glockner's, and I've been really happy with that. And, you know, Ebby, Andy, the boys, it's like family.
I think it was 1982. I had a herniated disc. Herniated disc is a painful thing. So I'm laying in bed in my home. I lived I lived on Shawnee Road. About Friday afternoon, about 5 o'clock, Ebb calls me up on my home phone. I'm laying in bed. He says, "Clay, I need you to pull together a little buy-sell agreement." That's what he always call it, a buy-sell agreement. You know, like implying that it's like changing the tags on a truck, you know.
Just that easy, huh?
Yeah. So I said, "Okay, Ebb, tell me what you're doing." "Well, there are these 2 companies in Huntington, West Virginia. One is called Huntington Battery and Supply, and one is called Ubasco Warehouse. And I want to buy them, and I want to get them under contract before somebody else does." I said, "Well, tell me," you know. He started telling me the whole prices and what he was buying and so forth. So I take all these notes laying on my back. And I said, "Well, Ebb, when do you need this?" He says, "Well, you dumbass, I need it right now. Why do you think I called you?" So it's 5 o'clock on Friday night. I'm laying in bed with a herniated disc. And he says, I'll be over and pick it up first thing in the morning, Saturday morning, in my home. Well, you know what I did? I did what he asked. I lay there. I took a clean legal pad. I wrote the whole thing out as best I could in longhand, probably around 25 pages. The next morning, he showed up, banged on the door. My little daughter took it to the door and handed it to him. I had said, "Maybe you can get somebody to type this for us." I don't know what he did, but you know what? It worked. We bought him.
His favorite place on earth was right here at the dam. And even when he couldn't drive himself, we had a couple guys that would look after him. They'd pick him up at the retirement center and bring him over here, and he had a wooden bench. He'd fix himself a Ricky Ticky, which was either in the summertime it was a gin and tonic, and in the wintertime it was scotch and water. He'd sit out on that bench and watch the river traffic and talk to the Lord, and you'd walk up behind him every once in a while and give him a hug. And I said, "Pop, what are you doing?" He said, "I'm praying." I said, "Well, you're drinking a gin and tonic." And he said, "It helps me pray better."
Your best buys are made at Glockner Chevrolet.
You love our Uncle Ebb.
'Cause Uncle Ebb is a good old boy.